Hello, my name is Mena Ruparel. I'm a solicitor, arbitrator, and I'm joined today by Mark Penston.
Hi, Mena. Mark Penston. I'm a chartered financial planner, and for I guess over 20 years now, we've been doing pension sharing reports and acting as financial neutrals as per the resolution terms, so helping people through the understanding of separating the finances on divorce.
Thank you, Mark. Mark and I are recording this video, for want of a better word, today to help you to understand a little bit more about the Financial Information Assessment Meeting, the FIAM. There are other videos available on the FIAMS website that you can view to give you a bit of an understanding about the structure of the FIAM. But Mark and I thought it would be useful just to talk about the detail of the meeting. So Mark, can you give me an idea of cases where a FIAM might be useful and why?
Well, I think Mena, both our experiences are that sometimes people come to the divorcing table with a whole pile of financial assets which maybe only one person understands, and the other person doesn't. And the intention of a FIAM is to help each party understand what they have and how it works and how it can be divided on divorce, and in particular, if one party has a lower level of financial understanding than the other, then what we've regularly done for years is have meetings to help elevate the knowledge of one party so that they can go into negotiations, if you like, a bit more empowered and less threatened, that they have a little bit of knowledge about how these things work. So the meetings could be individual if all parties agree, or could be joined.
At the heart of the idea of a FIAMS, which isn't a new idea, because as you say, you've been doing this for quite a while, but it's to let mediators and barristers and solicitors know that these services are out there and that financial advisors can act in a neutral capacity in order to give information about the current state of finances. And sometimes, as you say, one person doesn't know as much as the other, so they might need more time. As long as everybody agrees, that's fine. But also the parties might have started off from a point of knowledge, but over the years during the marriage, things have changed and they don't really understand what the current position is. And so it's about giving them the current information so they both are getting the same information. And then they can go back either to mediation or go back to their solicitors and negotiate, or even if they were in court proceedings, they can go to their barristers and say, right, here we are, this is the information. And actually we were thinking about doing route A, but that won't work because the finances aren't in the state that we thought they were in. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think it's often myth busting,
Okay.
and it's often trying to get people on the same wavelength or speaking the same language, because left independently, people will approach the same subject from different angles. And I think the great thing about these meetings are that it gets people on the same page and it gets people talking in the right direction with the right amount of information, and that's when you can get decisions being made.
I think from my point of view as a solicitor, often historically what we've done is we've gathered together financial information without realising the nuances of the financial information, particularly for pensions. And then negotiations are really difficult to manage because everyone's got a different idea about what you can do with that pension or how it's going to work at the end of the day. So it's useful for everybody to start off with the same information so that they can negotiate knowing what the financial neutral said. So when would somebody consider bringing a financial neutral in to have a FIAM with the party? So at what point is it a good idea?
Well, our view is as soon as possible. Our view is collate all the information should be collated, whether it's on a Form E or whatever, And then if you bring a financial neutral in early, then you set the direction of all the subsequent discussions, because everyone's speaking from the same basis.
Yeah.
And if we're introduced too late, then sometimes you'll find that things are being discussed which can't really be enabled, from technical and legal reasons. It can't be done. So it's much better to say, look, this is the direction in which you're heading. It's setting expectations.
And so what happens in a meeting with a FIAM? What can the parties expect? What can the solicitors expect? Mediators? How do you work it?
I think if we can have a heads up as to what we're looking at prior to the meeting, we can obviously prepare so we understand what's present. And it's then first of all asking some questions. We're financial planners. We're great at asking people questions about what they want in the future, and divorce in a way is no different. It's what are your objectives in dividing the assets, and that's when you get the feedback about what they're expecting and what they think can happen, and so that they then set those parameters themselves. So once we've understood what the objectives are, within that we'd ask what questions they want to get from the meeting, and both parties, and ensuring that both parties have an equal voice, and then we would spend time discussing the relevant points which clearly need to be discussed. So they don't need to know the ins and outs of pensions unless they particularly want to. In general, these conversations are quite high level, but high level in the sense of this is what you've got and this is how it can be shared.
So how are you, presumably at the moment, you're conducting these meetings online?
Yeah.
Do you record the meetings? Are the recordings available to solicitors, mediators?
Yeah, I mean, recordings by agreement with all parties, we would record them. We would distribute the recording. If mediators, lawyers, or barristers wish to listen in, I think the recommended way is if they want to listen in, that's fine, but we would have them on mute, because this really is about the two clients, and peripheral interruptions can be very distracting. And if we want to engage properly with the individuals, then it really should be a focus between me and the couple, or me and the single person.
But with agreement, you're happy to accommodate requests, because there are times, and I know this from working with you in the past, where I don't understand something sufficiently well enough in order to be able to negotiate on it. Let's say it's an investment portfolio with cash and shares in it, and I will have to say to you, well, how does this work? It's a joint portfolio, the parties have said this, one party saying this, one party saying that. I just need to understand, how does it operate and what are the tax consequences, or the practicalities, and I need to ask questions about that. It's something that I could watch the video and then say, well, actually I didn't understand that, and send you an email afterwards and say,
well, you could do, or ask a question on the chat. So that's fine, and I think dealing with questions like that is fine, but not with interruptions. Because I think sometimes clients just need that extra space and time to think and respond, and not worry that someone else is going to butt in.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because the clients themselves will have different levels of financial knowledge. So you'll be explaining something to them, because it's an information meeting after all. So you're giving information. The lawyers will be picking up, and the mediators will be picking up information at a different speed to the clients, faster or slower, depending. And what you don't want is people constantly interrupting an information meeting, so that the parties in receipt of the information have lost the thread of thought.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I can understand that maybe putting a question in the chat box, or emailing afterwards if you're watching a recording, as long as they've got access to you, because you will, by that point, once you've had a meeting, have sufficient understanding of the parties' finances that you should be able to very easily answer questions about the practicalities, which is what lawyers are often concerned with at the negotiation phase.
Yeah, and we do that, and where we are jointly instructed, of course, if we have any material discussions offline, then they would always be documented and communicated with both sides. So we maintain that joint approach even outside of a Zoom meeting.
So it would be completely transparent.
Yeah, it has to be.
And of course, your role isn't to negotiate. So even though at the beginning of a FIAM, you might be asking the parties what their objectives are, what you're not trying to do is implement their objectives. You're just trying to give them information so that they understand.
Absolutely. But the point of asking objectives is if they say they want X and X isn't achievable, then part of that meeting is to say, no, these are your avenues which are open to you, and these are the ones that aren't, and why. And often a conversation of the consequences of different actions are discussed as well. So it's not uncommon that certainly if you're mediating where people are happy to chat, in the same room, a solution often becomes evident just through that interaction between the couple.
I think that's really useful. The $1 million question is then how do people find somebody who is willing to act in a financial neutral capacity?
Well, that is the $1 million question, and it's hard to answer it, I guess, without sounding too biased. But at Bluesky, we've been involved in pension sharing work and mediation work for over 20 years, and you pick up so much. And I think the skills the advisor needs is not only the skill in understanding financial concepts and pensions. Of course, they need good client skills, but they also need a good understanding of the legal framework within which they're advising. And it's a rare breed. I think there's only something like 20 resolution accredited IFAs in the UK, so it's a thin population. Now,
Resolution being a membership organisation that holds an accreditation for both solicitors and IFAs, and we'll put a link to the Resolution website so you can find a Resolution accredited IFA. But as you say, there aren't that many of them.
But I think most of our audience will have heard of the PAG report, and in Appendix D of the PAG report is this self-certification criteria for a pension on divorce expert. And I don't think, that's more, that criteria is more relevant for production of a pension sharing report, but a lot of it is highly relevant to the skills which a pension on or a MIAMS, or someone who's running a MIAMS would need, which would be
FIAMS.
FIAMS, which would be sufficient financial knowledge, sufficient experience and understanding of the legal framework.
Yeah, I think experience is really important. It's not good. It's not enough just to understand finances. You have to understand how finances interacts with family law.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you need to be a family lawyer. And it's not enough for the financial neutral to be working with a family lawyer, because you actually need to understand the court system, mediation, arbitration, collaborative law options. There are quite a few things that you need to understand. Otherwise, you won't know what all the options are that are available to the parties, will you?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think quite often lawyers have good relationships with people they've used before. Again, it's my view is it would have to be an independent person, because an independent person would have a good broad knowledge of all the different types of policies and investments that a client might have.
So independent, by which you mean independent of an organisation?
Yes. So yeah, you would have to ask, are you totally independent? so not working for St James's Place or Zurich or an insurance company where you would only have a narrow understanding of a given range of products. The independent advisor would have relationships with all product providers, and even if they weren't au fait with a particular product, they would have a route to be able to go and access that information easily, covered by their compliant, their PI and all that sort of stuff.
So a solicitor might already know someone. What if the parties between them have got a financial advisor who has been assisting them, and that financial advisor says, oh, I could be a financial neutral? How do the lawyers, mediators, barristers know whether or not that's a good idea? How can they check whether that person could act in a financial neutral capacity?
Well, I guess one of the things we should work on, Mena, is actually cutting that Appendix D of the PAG report down into something which is financial advisor, more relevant, I think. So there's something for our to-do list, but it's asking whether they've got that experience that we've talked about, and I've been involved in cases where there's been an IFA involved, as the client's IFA involved as well, so as a kind of joint approach, because they obviously know what the clients have got and why. Often that's a big question, is, well, why did you take this policy out? And
yeah,
the IFA will understand that. How it works through in the divorce scenario is probably better for someone like ourselves to pass comment on. So, we're always happy to work with other professionals.
I think that's important, because a lot of people will say, well, we don't need a financial neutral, we've already got someone. But often I find that person who has worked with the parties during the marriage will already have decided that they are going to work with one of the parties after the divorce. And so it would be difficult, I imagine, for them to maintain a neutral capacity, because if you had a couple that came to you in a neutral capacity, would you be able to work with one of them? Would you be able to come to an agreement to work with one of them after the divorce?
Well, that can be so from our point of view. If we're jointly instructed, we're impartial, we operate within that framework. It's not uncommon that we've developed a good relationship with those clients, both of them, throughout that environment. And only once we've seen that divorce through and we've done our work, we are open to clients coming back to us to say, as a separate instruction, you clearly understood about all my financial, objectives and what I've got and what I'm left with. Can you now help me rebuild my financial future? And as a completely separate instruction, we have agonized over this from a impartiality point of view, but we are very happy that we can act impartially as a single joint expert, and then for either individual as either or both sometimes as a completely separate instruction.
So just to go back on a couple of things that you said that you have been instructed. Now, when you're working in your capacity as a pension or divorce expert producing reports, you receive an official letter of instruction. Are you expecting an official letter of instruction when you're working as a financial neutral FIAM?
No.
So you could just, as long as all the parties are involved, they can decide how they want to send you information. There doesn't need to be one letter that.
No, because you'll appreciate, the variety of needs and wants are much better discussed. We love conversations with clients. Tell us what you're looking for. Don't try and put that in a letter, because you will lose so much. So a lot of these meetings that we have will come from some kind of a less formal dialogue.
Great. And so then the meetings that you have don't necessarily produce a report. So there wouldn't necessarily be a report. It's just you giving information to the parties.
Yeah.
And you charge a fee for that, depending on how long you spend with the parties.
Yeah.
Then when your work is finished, if one of the parties comes back to you, would you check with the other party that they don't mind you working with their ex-spouse?
Well, no, while I'm still in that, while I'm still instructed as a joint expert, I can't have offline conversations with other people, because that could pervert the very nature of what we're discussing. So it's only once my work is done and they've made a decision
Yeah.
that I can then help, let's say, implement a pension sharing case, or help with their financial planning.
And you mentioned being an expert in the FIAMS world. Do you think you're considered to be a single joint expert? Would
Well, I
you?
think, as
Because
you
you're not.
say, there's no legal drive for that,
No.
but the principles of maintaining communication with both sides, being impartial, not having a conflict of interest, those principles of being a single joint expert, I can't think of any that wouldn't apply if I was in a FIAM meeting.
And as Mark has said, we are working on a self-certification for a financial neutral, which we hope will help lawyers and parties and mediators to understand whether people have got the correct qualifications or the correct abilities or the experience required to act in a financial neutral capacity. Do you think, Mark, there's anything else that parties need to know? Because there isn't one database where they can easily go and say, oh, there's hundreds of financial advisors here. There sometimes is a tendency when you're at a local networking event, to meet a financial advisor who says, I can do what you want me to do. Is that a good idea to follow up with that person, or a bad idea? I know from my perspective, I look at LinkedIn profiles of financial advisors to see whether they say they're doing divorce work, to see if they've got any articles that might indicate they're doing divorce work. It's really difficult to know whether someone can do what they say they're going to do.
Well, I think you're spot on, Mena. I think we've seen some disappointing output from people who, they might be very good financial planners, but because they haven't got that legal perspective, sometimes they've missed stuff. And I think if someone says they are, then have a look at the website. The benefit of the internet is that you can delve into people, and well, if they are an expert on divorce stuff, then you would have expected them to write some article somewhere, or, as you say, put that on their LinkedIn profile or on their website.
I also think LinkedIn is quite useful because you can recommend someone. And so if you look at someone's LinkedIn profile and they have been recommended by divorce lawyers for the work they've done, then it's probably a fairly good bet. And also, if somebody says to me, well, how do I know you can do X, Y, Z, I would say, well, you can speak to a client of mine, or I've got these recommendations, or look at my website, because everyone's got testimonials and recommendations. So if somebody hasn't got any, or they've only got one or two, you might want to think twice, or I certainly would think twice, and talk to other lawyers in the local area and say, Joe Bloggs from down the road has said that they can do this. Have you ever used them?
Yeah. Yes, that's the benefit of who do you know and referrals is often where you end up on this, I think.
Great. I think that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Mark.
Pleasure.